Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live Liverpool Talk Show on Football Talk podcast. My name is Ozzy, and I'm your host for this evening. Now, we'll discuss some circulating rumours as well as a bit of news in terms of the Liverpool team. We've got a few updates in regards to players returning from injury, and we've also got Isak doing his first training session for the club. So, we'll talk about the transfer related news first, and then we'll go on to uh, official news, and then we'll go on to discuss other things as well. So we'll start with Ibrahima Konaté. Now, in terms of this whole week, it's been a big talking point with regards to Ibrahima Konaté, and every day it's conflicting news. You're getting one side that's saying that there's no sort of developments or Liverpool have offered a new contract, and on the other side you're hearing that Real Madrid are pretty much very keen on the player, and he seems pretty much Madrid bound at this moment. So the latest that I've heard or I've read online is that nothing has been decided in regards to Konate's contract. Liverpool are there, and there has been some talks, but Konate hasn't given the impression that he wants to leave Liverpool yet. Now, on the other side, Real Madrid are confident they can sign Ibrahima Konate on a free transfer next summer. The same sources told this media outlet last December about Trent Alexander-Arnold, and they reported that he would almost certainly join Real Madrid, and some have gone as far as to say that the senior officials have already discussed um, an agreement or verbal agreement, I should say, with Konate. So my thoughts on those kind of news. It feels like he's Madrid bound. I've said it for a few weeks now. I feel like when a player's silent about his current situation, but you're hearing more noise from the other side, then that's an indication that the player is no longer interested in signing a new contract, and his head has been turned, and he's looking more towards leaving rather than staying at the club. So for me, yeah, it's a little bit disappointing that that is his current stance, because I feel like with the current Liverpool team and the current project that we have, it's such an exciting time to be part of the club, and for him to be swayed to join Madrid. It could be for a number of reasons. It could be a lifelong ambition of him to play for one of the Spanish giants, or it could be simply as him wanting to play there because of the history where they've had a lot of French players, and also right now they've got current, we've got a few current players of the likes of Mbappe, Camavinga, and Tchouaméni. So maybe that is a project that entices him to move over there and join his French, contingent over there. So yeah, it's one where, because it's not official news, I can't crash out because I know a lot of fans are really annoyed about this sort of update that we're getting. But for me, it's is very much parallel in terms of the Trent Alexander stuff that we encountered last season. Trent was very silent. Of course, there were a couple of moments where he was a bit coy, or he'll be a bit, give you that sort of feeling that he might stay. Celebrations and all that sort of stuff. You're thinking, oh, okay, he might want to stay now, but I don't think it was ever in the cards for Trent to stay. And I see the same kind of similarities with Konate. He's not saying much, but sometimes that is the answer right there when someone's not talking, because it's quite clear that they don't want to say anything out loud because it's very early on in this season, and he'd rather let the reps do what they're doing in the background, and once everything's official, that's when he'll make that announcement. So I don't expect, if he does decide to move on to Real Madrid, I don't expect him to announce it anywhere near January. It will probably be done closer to the end of the season, similar to Trent Alexander-Arnold's situation. Because nowadays you don't really hear pre-contract agreements with certain players, and I feel like that's going to be the same here. We're not going to hear it, even if it is official in terms of the background, where internally they have agreed to deal with him. But I don't think we'll hear anything until late next year. So yeah, it's not a positive look for Konate, but I don't think, he will stay at Liverpool. I don't get that indication. So for me, it looks like he is Madrid bound, and it's time for Liverpool to identify his successor because you do have Mark Gay, who for me will be the like for like replacement. But at the same time, I still feel like we need an additional um, centre back because of Joe Gomez, who doesn't have the best of injury records, and he might be moved on next summer as well. So I think we need to future-proof that position a bit more. Look at the market and see who's out there. There are a few options where they can certainly fit the bill in terms of replacing Konate. Because I'm not just saying because it looks like he's leaving. I don't think he's irreplaceable. Of course, in terms of his talent, I've said it a number of times, and I'm not going to just, you know, change my tone because he's not staying with us. But I do believe that he's one of the best centre backs in Europe. And but in terms of what he brings as a skill set, I feel like it can be replaced, it can be transformed into our current team um, on the basis that we've got Van Dijk. Van Dijk is the unicorn when it comes to centre backs in world football. So play alongside him, as long as they have the right balance and can form a good partnership with Van Dijk, we should be fine in that department. So let's see what happens. It could potentially be Mark Gahey. It could be someone else. And speaking of Mark Gahey, no real updates, but according to Chris Bascom, Liverpool fully expect Mark Gahey to join them on a free transfer next summer. So that would possibly indicate, him being the direct replacement for Konate. I would prefer if we can sign Mark Gahey in January, but maybe the club are frustrated with the way Crystal Palace handled the business on transfer deadline day and feel like, they don't deserve a penny out of us for this particular deal in this sense. So let's see what happens. Of course, with Mark Gay, we're not going to get any further updates either. But it seems to be everything is pointing towards a summer move. So let's see what happens. Just got a couple of comments before we speak about the next rumor. Derek, big up Derek. He says it's pretty obvious the guy wants out. Don't want anyone at Anfield who doesn't want to be here. I agree with you. I totally agree. If he hasn't shown that commitment or the or pledged his future to the club, you don't really want someone in that kind of form because they're not committed to the cause. And I would have to question his mentality because right now the early signs of what he's produced isn't great. He's had some shocking performances. The last one against Arsenal was a little bit better, but in general terms, he's been woeful. So in my opinion, and I did say this in our opening game against Bournemouth, I feel like his head has been turned, and it does happen. You've seen it with certain players in the past where if they know there's a move on the other side, then they're not quite focused because in the back of their minds they've pretty much made it or they've secured the move, so they don't have to work as hard if that makes sense. So I don't know. He needs to improve because even though his reps and Ruben might be speaking privately, I know it's unethical, but stuff certainly happens. He still has to produce a good level of performances because they might change their mind and be like, actually, you're not, as good as we thought you were. So he needs to improve, and of course, if he does improve, it helps us in the short term. But I've also heard fans say, we should sell him in January. I don't think that's going to be possible now because um, with Real Madrid being the front runner to secure his signature, they can easily sign him on a pre-contract agreement. So that's not going to be an option anymore, unfortunately. In terms of Mark Gay, that's something we can look into as well to try and get him on a actually no, we can't even do that because it's foreign clubs, isn't it? But we could definitely have a bid for him in January or have some sort of private agreement that he's going to join next summer. So let's see what happens. I'm sure we'll get some further updates in due course. But at the minute, for me, it feels like he is Madrid bound. I'll be hugely surprised if he stays at Liverpool. Um, but let's see. Let's wait and see in terms of what happens in regards to Konate's future. Dara Azizi Bilal Dara says, if that's the case, just tell the club. Has to be January before any other club comes in. So the thing is, he could possibly have told the club or has given them some sort of indication that he does want to leave. But that's not going to be communicated to the public because look how early we are in the season. If we're hearing that kind of news so early, that's going to ruin our sort of preparations for the campaigns up, in terms of the Premier League as well as the Champions League and other competitions. But also the fans will be against him right away. So it doesn't put him in good light if he's already agreed to move literally less than a year than it's supposed to pan out. So it doesn't help anyone for that news to be made official right now in September. Um, it needs to be kept private. I'm sure he has possibly given that sort of indication because the club have been trying to get a new contract signed from him for about 10 months, maybe even longer. So he's not showing any willingness to sign that contract. Uh, you can always say it's a financial reason as to why he hasn't, but I feel like we have offered him from what we've heard from reports that we have offered him close to 200, which is what he's asking for. So it can't completely be a financial decision from his part. It's definitely where doesn't want to be at the club. He wants to join Real Madrid. That's the appeal for him right now. So if that's the case, we have to, you know, not accept it as such, but we have to be a bit more strategic. We have to be a bit more cutthroat and feel like, all right, fine. If you want to do that, then the perfect scenario would be to get Mark Gay in January and then we sign another defender in next summer. And then we can have a formidable backline with five quality centre backs, in my opinion. So yeah, it doesn't look good, but we'll just have to wait and see. But once we get some update. Dar said, then why make an improved offer if the club knows he wants out? He hasn't clearly said that he wants out. He's not outright said, I want to leave, but he's not shown any willingness to sign a new contract. So the club are probably thinking, oh, maybe it's a financial thing where, we haven't quite met his requirements. So we're going to speak with his reps and then offer the best contract possible based on, the feedback that they're given. So that's why, Liverpool haven't lost complete hope. Um, I don't think he's outright said, "Oh, I'm not staying. I want to go Real Madrid." He has. I think it would be very idiotic of him to do that right now when we're in September. The season has just started. If that was the case, then we should have just sold him in the summer. But he's never shown that indication. The club feel like there is a chance of him staying internally. So we'll just have to wait and see. Of course, we're getting different reports because the sources that are suggesting that he wants to move to Real Madrid, they're coming from Spain. And the sources that are saying that we're still in discussions are from the UK. So it's what you believe, isn't it, in terms of what you're hearing. But I think only time will tell. I think maybe we'll get a bit more of a clearer picture closer to January window because then we'll know, where Konate stands. And there's nothing to say that he can't sign a new Liverpool contract. It might be something on the cards, but we're just not aware of it at this stage. So for me, he hasn't said no, he hasn't declined to stay at Liverpool, but at the same time, he hasn't shown a willingness to sign a new contract. So that's two different things there. So let's see what happens. For me, in terms of my gut feeling, I feel like he's Madrid man. I just feel like that's the move that he wants. So Liverpool have to be a bit more smart and try and get his replacement in as soon as possible, which looks like it is Mark Gahey, um, and try and get him through the door in January. So let's see what happens going forward. Now, moving on to the next rumor is Michael Olise. Now, in regards to Michael Olise, um, we've heard, rumors and little rumbles here and there that we have pretty much earmarked him as the long-term successor to Mohamed Salah. And apparently, according to reports, Bayern Munich have had discussions internally on what steps to take if a mega offer actually arrives for Elise next summer. And the reason why they're having these discussions because the sale of Elise could become a dose opener, as I've as I've read on this article and enable FC Bayern to enter a new future. So that makes sense. But the big question is, what kind of price range would Bayern Munich be after? And apparently, according to these reports, it's in the region of 150 slash 160 million euros. Let's see how much that is in pounds. Because it won't be. It would be roughly 138 um, million if it was 160. So 130. So 130 to 140 would be the range. Um, so the big question is that the kind of fee that Liverpool would want to pay to sign Michael Olise? Of course, to be Mohamed Salah's long-term successor. I don't know. Oh, and people will be like, "Well, we've just spent so much money. Why can't we spend that money again?" I don't think that's the plan to spend 400 odd million every summer. This was where we won we won the Premier League, which generated a lot of money last season. We went through to the second phase of the Champions League, so that generated some funds, plus new sponsorship deals with Adidas. All of that played a part. And of course, our ninth deal concluded, but of course, I'm sure that we, gained the last payment from that deal as well. Just TV rights. There's a lot of things that are on the up in regards to Liverpool, generating a lot of revenue uh, last season. So we do have the funds. There's nothing to rule that out. But I just feel like that's quite a big fee. In Germany, you don't really, sell players or even buy players for that kind of figure. The Florian Wirtz though is the biggest transfer fee in German history in terms of selling a player out of the Bundesliga. So in my opinion, I don't think he'd cost that much unless he goes on a bit of a madness where he's pound for pound the best right winger in world football. Like if he surpasses Yamal's numbers, then maybe that will be the conversation. But I think he'll be available for around 80, 90 million. I think he has a release clause as well, so it's going to be easy um sort of way to negotiate a deal. But this article seems to suggest that there is no release clause. So it depends, what you believe. But we've heard from numerous sources that a release clause will be active from next summer. So that will be the perfect time for Liverpool to take advantage and get that deal over the line. So let's see what happens. For me, it's a no-brainer. Elise is the guy that I want to replace Salah in the team, and it'd be great to have him before Salah's contract expires as well. So for me, he's definitely the guy that I want us to sign next summer. Um, that is the big Aussie chat. Hope all is well today. When's your Burnley preview? So my Burnley preview will be tomorrow evening, possibly around 11 p.m. So my normal time slot. So yeah, look out for that. We'll go through the team news. Arsenal does have a press conference tomorrow. So once we get a bit of an update, we'll have a better idea in terms of where certain players are in terms of their rehabilitation from injury. We'll also get an update in terms of players coming from international duty if they've come back safe and sound, and there's no issues with them, and then we'll be able to predict the lineup a bit more to the T. So yeah, so tomorrow will be the match preview of Burnley versus Liverpool. Now, on to the next rumor, and this was something that was circulating earlier today. Slightly old news, but maybe worth talking about today. So, the news is that last summer, um, Liverpool uh, realized that Luis Diaz actually wanted to go to Man City, which is strange because that's not something that you really hear. Um, on a normal basis, and the recruitment team proposed Diaz might move to Etihad in exchange for Julian Alvarez. And then we got a response from City saying that we don't sell to our rivals. Apparently, Liverpool responded by saying we neither do we. So sounds like a funny exchange of words there. But City then ended up selling Alvarez to Atletico Madrid. Diaz, of course, stayed and focused on his current team, which was Liverpool. And then Liverpool ended up signing Chiesa for 10 million as well. Of course, another body in the squad. So the big question is, would Liverpool have benefited with Alvarez in the team last season, or could it have hampered our pursuit for Isak and Ekitike from just the summer gone? It's an interesting one because I think if Alvarez replaced Diaz, what kind of impact would he have been in the team? Traditionally, I would say Alvarez is more of a striker, isn't he? More of a number nine. Back can, drop deeper players at a 10 or a 9.5 if you want to play with a false nine. But if it was a light for light replacement for Diaz, then I would have expected him to have been a player for the left wing. He definitely would have brought us goals, from that part of the pitch, and his work rate would have definitely been just as good as Diaz, maybe even better. Um, but if he was signed, then I think what would have happened this summer would have been that he would have transitioned into being a more of a central striker, and then that would have meant that only Isak or Ekitike would have been the players to come in, and it might potentially have been Ekitike and not Isak. So, of course, we haven't seen Isak in action as of yet. But in hindsight, for me, I would have preferred the current situation where I would have preferred to have Isak in my team rather than Alvarez. And don't get me wrong, Alvarez is a top striker. He ticks probably all the the checklist that we need in that striker, especially last season where we weren't very sure in terms of what Arsenal wanted in a striker. Does he want a false nine or does he want a traditional striker? We weren't quite sure because we played, different profiles up top. We had Nunes one week, then we had Jota, and then we had, we could have it was mainly Jota and Nunes, but of course, Gakpo could have been a false nine option. We had Diaz playing that false nine option more so than not. So different profiles, throughout the season last year. So we didn't really know what type of striker Arsenal was after. For me personally, I've always wanted Isak. That's a striker I've been wanting for quite some time now, for about a couple of years, because he's a player that excites me when I see, a striker on the pitch. He's a player with flair, great dribbling ability, but he can score all types of goals, score bangers from outside the box, clinical in terms of one-on-one finishing, good with his head as well in terms of good, aerial ability. So for me, he has everything in his locker, and he's able to play slightly different roles. He's a number nine, but he can play as a wide forward if needed. So for me, he just gives us a different outlook, and also the difference between Alvarez and Isak is that Isak is, of course, a lot taller, but he's got a different type of game to him. He likes a physical battle, whereas I feel like Alvarez is more of a silkier player where he likes to move around and doesn't want to get involved in those kind of battles at all. So not saying he can't handle it, he can certainly, handle that physical element of the game, but I feel like Isak enjoys it more. And I feel like because you have that type of striker, it's always going to be a headache for whatever team you perform against, especially with teams in the Premier League that have 6 foot plus centre backs and they want it to be a physical battle. Isak's the one that will definitely be on top in terms of producing the goods and getting the best out of the team, but also making them look like silly as well on the pitch. So for me, I'm probably happy to how things have panned out. Not saying I would have wanted Alvarez, but if you had said Alvarez last season or Ekitike and Isak this season, I probably would have gone for the two that we've just signed in the summer. So yeah, interesting. This it's been released today in terms of this information. But I think everything worked out in the end. So yeah, let's see, how Isak, evolves in the team because I'm sure everyone has seen the training ground footage and yeah, he's looking lethal considering that he hasn't played a competitive game for about 3, 4 months. He looks very sharp. He's embarrassed a few defenders. I'm not sure who that defender is on the floor. I think he's one of our young players from the reserves. But yeah, he he put it into ground with ease, produced a nice finish here. Scored a lot of good goals. Scoring headers, volleys, one-on-one finishes. So yeah, he's definitely excited me in terms of just seeing the first training session. I can also see, rival fans getting a little bit concerned. Newcastle fans, you know, get feeling even more annoyed that he's left the club because, he's about to cook. He's about to be unleashed. So yeah, it's a positive, for Liverpool going forward. And also from the training ground footage that was presented yesterday, uh, Chiesa seems to be forming a good partnership with Isak, which is no surprise. You know, good players always form good partnerships, and they kind of have a good understanding. You know, depending on how good they are, and there's a lot of moments in that training footage where Chiesa was attacking that right hand side and whipping in a lot of crosses. You got Isak hitting volleys and headers and tap-ins as well. So it showed a good variation in terms of game. This was a moment here where Chiesa hit a low cross, and then you had Isak, tapping in from close range. So that's going to be interesting because I think Chiesa is a player of high quality and will know how to get the best out of a player like Isak. Who's going to be a lethal striker for us in this team. But there's also, a bit of a sadness about Chiesa not being in the Champions League squad. Why was he not selected? Because he's showing, good sort of traits or ability in the training footage that we've seen in the last 2 weeks, and I feel like he's definitely working on his sort of adapting to the physical aspect of the game. But he looks sharper, he looks quick on the ball. Um, so hopefully, it's something where it can be rectified where we do add him later on in the Champions League stages. But for me, it wasn't nice that he wasn't selected. But in terms of our other campaigns, hopefully he has a bigger role to play in our Premier League campaign as well as the Carabao Cup and FA Cup, which will happen further down the line. But yeah, so far he looks sharp. He's looked good in training. He's looked to have formed a good partnership with Isak. So yeah, only onwards and upwards in regards to Chiesa and Isak. Just got a comment here from Flix. It says, "Hi, big up yourself, Flix. I hope you're well." Um, and also during training, we got a surprise face who took part, and that was Stefan Bacic. So it looks like he's fit, and I don't know if he's ready for selection, but at least he's back in training and he's back in the mix in terms of regaining match fitness or working on his rehabilitation. We're not quite sure in terms of what stage is that, but yeah, it's good to have him. He will be a good option for us. Um, you know, Something I feel like maybe goes a little bit under the radar, but he could be a centre back option. I know we missed out on Gay, but for the next few months, he could be a viable option for midfield and defence. When he was at Las Palmas, he pretty much played as a centre back for most of his times, and they loved him in La Liga. So hopefully, it's a positive sign. Hopefully, he stays fit because that's been his issue. In terms of ability, I think he's a good player. I feel like some fans, speak a bit too highly. I feel like they overrate him a little bit, but I do believe he's a talented player, and yeah, I think he's a great option for us to have. So hopefully, he can be utilized soon. And if he is fully fit, I'd like him to be played in the Southampton fixture because that would be a great way to get back into the team and get back into playing first team football. I have Double D, big up Double D says Bashir is alive. He certainly is. He's live and kicking right now. So yeah, let's see, if he's available to play in the upcoming games. Um, and also another good sight, we got to see Jeremy Frimpong. So he's back in training. Whether he's fully fit to start remains to be seen, but I do expect him to be in the squad or at least on the bench, and available for selection. So good to have him back. He's been out for 2, 3 weeks with a bit of a hamstring issue. So you have to be careful not to rush your players after that kind of injury. Of course, he's a speed merchant, so hamstrings are very, very fragile for these type of players. Ask Michael Owen. So we have to manage him correctly and make sure we don't rush him because we do have options in the squad. If we need a right back, so both guys been fantastic there. If Arsenal wanted to go another route, he's got Joe Gomez, Bradley's regain a bit more match fitness recently as well. So yeah, so it's going to be very interesting in terms of does he get selected in this game. Um, so yeah, let's see what Arne Slot confirms during the press conference tomorrow. Daz asked, is Isak in the Champions League squad, Aussie? I believe he is, but I will double check for you because the squad was announced a few days ago. So, of course, Isak was already signed with us. So he should be available for, or I think he has been selected for our squad. So let me just double check just to so I don't give you any misinformation. Yes, he is. He has been selected. So out of the attackers is Isak, Salah, Gakpo, Ekitike, and Rio and Gamoa has also been added to the squad. So yeah, he is in our squad. So he could be available for the Atletico Madrid fixture. Whether he starts, I'm not too sure. Personally, I wouldn't want to start him so soon just because of, inactivity. He hasn't played too many games in a competitive level. So for me, I think the best way would be to have him on the bench against Burnley, give him about 20 minutes, and the same against Atletico, and then we start him against Everton in the Merseyside derby. That's how I would look at it. Slowly transition him into the team where you don't want to rush him too soon. And once we're like, you know what, he looks ready to start, that's when we can put him in the firing lineup. So yeah, that's the way I would do it. So let's see what happens. Dawood said, don't see him starting until Everton. Also, yeah, I think he would be a little bit premature to do that. He hasn't played for quite some time. Training is a different thing. You can train, you look sharp like he has done, in terms of the footage that came out yesterday. But at a competitive level, it's different, playing full 90 minutes at a very, very high rate. I don't expect the club to just put him in the firing lineup so soon. And also, we've got Ekatike, who's done really well so far this season. So why displace him just because we've got a new striker? Let's be sensible. Let's get Isak to full fitness because I think now he will be training with the team, but I'm pretty sure that he will have like a personal training program where maybe he'll do it before team training begins or afterwards, and then just focus on, getting his fitness up, and that way, he'll be able to, feel a bit more fresh when he's, coming into the team, and then the best way to get match fitness is playing matches. So he should be able to do that with the cameos against Burnley and Atletico Madrid. I think that'd be a good way to get him back into the team. And then once we feel like he's ready, that's when we'll get him in. I'd like him in the Merseyside derby, but maybe that might be even too soon as well. So let's see how he evolves, and yeah, he should be at least involved in the next fixture against Burnley. So yeah, that's the way I'm looking at it. That says I will start the derby or bench. Yeah, it will depend how he does against Burnley and Atletico Madrid. If he performs at a very good level and he's not missed a beat, then yeah, then you got to start him against Everton. But there's no even rush to even do that. It's just a prediction that I'm going for. So let's see how it goes. But yeah, but very, very excited to see Isak in a red shirt. The way he's trained, and even just from hearing his comments in the interviews and seeing the vlog of when he signed, yeah, it's just building more excitement to seeing Isak on the pitch. So yeah, looking forward to his debut. Hopefully, it can be this Sunday, even if it's in a cameo sort of performance. And then this poster was presented on social media. I believe this was at the Liverpool City Centre, not far from Liverpool Line Street Station. Um, it's got our new superstar in the name of Florian Wirtz, and he's got a big week ahead of him because there's a lot of doubters, in regards to his ability. He showcased his talent for Germany against Northern Ireland the other day, scoring a spectacular free kick. So he's come back to Liverpool in a good mood and huge confidence. So hopefully he can replicate that form into the next fixture against Burnley. So yeah, looking forward to how he does. For me, there's no sort of rush for him to produce 10 out of 10 performances. He will gradually get there. It's just it takes time for these type of players to get used to the intensity and the pace of the game. That is the key. I don't feel like, well, depends who you talk to, but I don't think there's a question in terms of his ability as a footballer. It's more so the adaptability of the Premier League. That's what he needs to work on, because I feel like there's times where when he receives the ball, he's taking too long to make that next move, or he's taking too long to release it. That's something he needs to work on. Where once he gets the ball, it needs to be pass and move, pass and move. It can't be hold the ball up. let me scope around and then find a pass. By then you've been clattered from behind and then the ball's gone. So he needs to be sharper in those kind of moments, and he'll get there. He's an elite talent, so I have no doubt that he will. It's just that we'll have to let him do it in his speed, and I think, once he finds that rhythm, he's going to showcase his ability. So I'm, very much very excited. I'm supportive in terms of what he's got going on for him. Against Arsenal, I feel like he showcased glimpses of his true ability there. He got better as the game went on, so that should bode well for the future. So for me, um, yeah, excited to seeing him in the next lineup, of course, against Burnley. That's it. If all were fit for Sunday, who would you be your midfield? I'll reveal it tomorrow because I need to know who's fit as well. And then plus, and we can discuss it in a bit more detail in terms of why I've gone for a certain selection. Because it is going to be a tricky one for Arnold Slot. Does he keep Szoboszlai in the in the right back position, or does he bring him back to midfield? What is McAllister like right now? Is he in a good shape to start? That's going to be the key there. These details they'll probably assess it today, and then present the information for us tomorrow. So once we have that information, then I'll present who my lineup should be for tomorrow. Uh, Essex Red, big up show. It says Konate's head is turned. Time to cash in on him in January. Take the 25 million. I don't know if we can cash in on him. Only because when you've got 6 months remaining in your contract, you are liable to sign a pre-contract agreement with a foreign club. And right now, there's no Premier League clubs interested in signing Konate. It's Real Madrid, and I think the other team that was close to, not close to, but rumored to be interested is PSG. So unless we get an offer from a Premier League side, I don't think that we can do any business right now. So a little bit frustrating because now it's like, what do we do? Do we try our best to get him on a new contract, or if his head has been turned, which I'll be brutally honest with you, I agree with you. I think his head has been turned, and he doesn't want to stay at the club. We'll just have to, utilize him until the end of the season. Um, but yeah, let's see what happens. I want us to sign Mark Gahey in January, and then put him down the picking order or have him on the bench and let Mark Gahey start from there. That would be the best case scenario, in my opinion. Essex Reds, they send him to Saudi. That could be an option. I'm not entirely sure, if they fit into that kind of, because I know with the Saudi Pro League and UEFA in terms of Europe, the rules are a little bit different. So I don't know if that's possible if we can cash in and send him to Saudi. I'll have to look into that, and then obviously I can confirm you in the next show. But if that is the case, that is an option. But I would assume that that's not a possibility where if a Saudi team wants him, they can do a pre-contract agreement. That would be my understanding. But I'm not entirely sure because it hasn't been done. To be fair, Saudis don't really move like that. They sign players right away. They don't really do that pre-contract agreement. They want it now and then. So let's see what happens. But yeah, if that was a possibility, 25 million would be a fair amount. Um, but let's see. I'm not entirely sure about that one. I think the same rules apply where um a player can sign a pre-contract agreement with a foreign club. But of course, in the past, it's always been European clubs. So with Saudi in the mix, I don't know if they fit into that criteria. But let's see. My assumption would be that that's not possible. But let's see. I'll have to look into that one and see what information I gather up. Uh, but that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Derek. Thank you to Dara. Thank you to Daz. Thank you to Flix FC. Thank you to Double D. And thank you to Essex Red for your comments. Appreciate your engagement as always, guys. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. In terms of upcoming show, I will be doing a match preview of Burnley versus Liverpool tomorrow evening at 11 p.m. UK time. So make sure to tune in, and hopefully we'll get some news in terms of how the players are, and hopefully they have returned with no injuries or no issues, and we have a fully fit squad ready for Burnley. So that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to speak with you all very, very soon. Goodbye.